Hello, everyone. Good morning to those of you who are joining from the US. I think it's still morning, even on the East Coast. Yep, 11 o'clock. So good morning. Happy Saturday. Hope everyone's weekend is off to a great start. So welcome to part 3 of our webinar series about teaching ESL online for the majors. And so part 3 is going to really cover the money-making side of working for these major companies. So far, in part 1, we gave an overview. In part 2, we learned some of the strategies in teaching and how each of these platforms prefers their teachers to teach lessons. And now we're going to get into really how you can schedule yourself and really maximize your earnings when you're working for one or multiple of these types of platforms. And so again, this presentation is going to focus on 4 specifically, those being Vipkid, Magic Ears, Bling ABC, and Prepley. And so without further ado, again, please hold your questions until the end of the webinar. We will have about a 10-minute Q&A session at the end where I will answer any of your questions. You can feel free to type those questions in the chat if you'd like, just so that you don't forget, and I will definitely check that chat and address those questions as we go along. And then just one more reminder, please make sure that you have your cameras and your audio turned off, or that you're muted, just so that we don't have any background noise throughout the presentation. Okay, so without further ado, let's get started about this exciting topic. I think this is one that most people really want to know about. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay. First of all, I just wanted to talk a little bit about some considerations when we start to think about the pay structure of working for some of these major online ESL companies. Some of the things that you really have to consider are your base pay versus bonuses and incentives. Most all of them, with the exception of Prepley that we will speak of, have some type of base pay plus bonus and incentives that will make up your total compensation. And the way that you earn those incentives or bonuses will be different depending on the platform that you're teaching for. Another thing that we have to keep in mind are the peak times. Now, peak times are important because each platform will have peak times. Now, most of these, especially the ones that we're talking about today, are going to have peak times that are associated with when most children will want to take classes in China or in on Beijing time. And so those peak times are going to typically be very early in the morning in the United States, but that's something to consider. Another thing that we want to consider when trying to maximize our earnings is how to set up our availability. This becomes very important if you decide to work for more than one ESL company, which is something that I would actually suggest, and we'll talk a little more about as we move through this webinar. And then the next thing would be like how often the schedules come out. So different platforms, depending on your availability, when you set up your availability, it's when their schedules will actually come out and when you'll know if you get booked or not. This will really help you maximize working for different organizations if you know when their schedules come out and how you can do it. And then, of course, flexibility. So some platforms are much easier to cancel classes, some are not. And if you're working for more than one platform and you end up having some type of scheduling overlap, sometimes it might be easier to cancel a class with less repercussions to you than other platforms. So that's something else we'll talk about. Now, I have a couple of notes here just as far as pay consideration in general. Number one, direct deposit is available for most of these organizations, and it is the easiest way to get paid. So I know for Vipkid, Bling ABC, Magic Ears, those all will have direct deposits directly to your bank. And if, at least in my case, the bank that I use, there are no fees associated with that. when they do a direct deposit directly to your bank account. Now with Prepley, they do not do a direct deposit to your bank account, but you can have them deposit your money to PayPal. And since Prepley does pay in USD, then there isn't a charge. So sometimes if you're getting paid on PayPal from an international organization where it has to translate the currency into the US dollar, you'll pay a percentage of a fee for that. But with Prepley using PayPal, you do not pay any fees. And then also the last thing to consider is that you are an independent contractor. So with all of these positions, you are independent contractor, which means that no taxes are withheld from your paycheck. This is completely 100% up to you to pay your own taxes. So many of you may have worked as independent contractors in other fields, but just so that you know, that is something to consider. You're an independent contractor, and so no taxes are taken out. Okay, so now that we know some things that we should definitely consider, let's get into the nitty-gritty of how the pay for each of these works. So what I'd like to do first is I want to give you an overview or a breakdown of what the pay is on each platform. And then from there, we will go into how you actually schedule yourself on these platforms. And I'll talk a little bit about strategically some ways that I schedule myself because I work for multiple platforms as well. So we'll get into a little bit of strategy as we move through this webinar. Okay, so let's get started first with Vipkid. So I know this looks very busy, but let's start with the first piece of this. Vipkid's base pay is $7 to $8 per class. And so what a base pay means is that that is the amount that you will get paid to teach a 25-minute class. And so with this, I know that $8 is very rare from the research that I've done and from just talking to other people who have gotten onto Vipkid. The $8 per class is very rare. This is for someone who may have lots and lots of experience and just really nails their interview and does really well in their mock class. So typically speaking, most people are going to start at the $7 an hour base rate. The other thing to consider when thinking about the base rate is that for Vipkid, your base rate does not change. So whatever base rate you are assigned when you first complete your mock classes, that will be your base rate for your career at Vipkid. So it is very important to try to do your best whenever you do your demo classes and your mock classes to try to get the highest base rate, even though there's not much of a difference between $7 and $8. If you think about, you may teach 50 or 60 classes in a month, that could really add up. And so that's why it's definitely important to try your best to get that highest base pay because it will not change. Now, the important thing that I want to get into next with Vipkid is how their bonus structure works, because that's really how you're going to be able to maximize your earnings with Vipkid. So first, let's look at this first diagram here. So Vipkid, the way that they do their bonuses is based on a tier system, and the tiers are based on how many classes you have taught, both within a calendar month and both within your career with Vipkid. So as you can see here, if we look across the top, this would be how many classes that you've taught within a given period, within a month. And so your first through your 20th class of the month, 21st through your 40th class of the month, and so on. If we look along the vertical column, this is how many classes that you've taught in your lifetime with Vipkid. So that's why you can see here, we can get down to 10,000 classes plus, because if you work for Vipkid for a very long time, you could end up getting a lot of classes here. And so we use this tier to kind of to figure out what our actual pay per class would be. So let's just take, for example, that you received a $7 base pay. So if you receive $7 base pay, that would mean that when you first start Vipkid, you're going to be in this 0 to 79 classes taught because you haven't taught classes before. And then if you think about your month and how many classes you teach per month, then you could fall into any of these ranges. So let's say that you first start with Vipkid and you taught 20 classes in the month of August. You would get your $7 plus another 80 cents per class that you taught for your first through your 20th class. Now, let's just say, for instance, that you were really good that month and you ended up teaching 40 classes that month. Well, how that would work is for the first 20 classes of the month, you would be paid $7.80. So your base pay plus the 80 cents. Then for your 21st class through your 40th class, you would actually be paid $8.20 because you would be paid your $7 plus this extra $1.20 for your 21st through your 40th class. And so on and so forth. So the more classes that you teach in a month, the higher your bonus is for each class that you teach. But the bonus is only for the classes within that category. So for instance, if I ended up teaching 140 classes in a month, I wouldn't get $2 extra for every class. I would only get $2 extra for my 131st class through my 180th class. Okay? Now, as your lifetime with VIP grows, you move up these tiers. And as you move up the tiers, the amounts of money that you get paid for the number of classes per month increases. So if we look here, if I were, let's say, a tier 8 employee where I've taught 4,500 classes for Vipkid, in this case, if I taught, let's say, 90 classes, I would be getting an extra $2.40. Whereas if I were still in tier 1, I'd only be getting $1.90 extra onto my base pay. So Vipkid really rewards you for the number of classes you teach per month and your lifetime of classes that you've taught on the platform. Now, let's just look at an example of what this looks like, just so that you can kind of see what a total pay would look like. So this is based on a base pay of $7, as we said here. And so as you can see for this person, they taught classes, they taught 20 classes here, classes 1 through 20. They received 80 cents, which was $7.80 per class. This was their total. Then they ended up teaching another 20 classes. So they got the next round. They were paid $8.20 for those classes. We see here classes 41 through 60, they taught another 20 classes. So for that group of classes, they were paid $8.60 per class. And then for the 61 through 90, they taught 30 classes in this one. That's an extra $1.80. They were paid $8.80. So this is how much money they made. And finally, they only taught 28 classes in this last category. But in this last category, they received $2.20 extra for $9.20 total for $257. And so if this were an example, the final pay would have been the accumulation of all of these for $1,013.60. So Vipkid, when we think about how their pay system works, it's really based on the number of classes that you teach. And why this can be very important to think about with Vipkid is because, remember, with Vipkid, the parents pick you as their tutor. And so it takes a little bit of time, especially as a new tutor on Vipkid, to really build up your clientele. And so that's why sometimes Vipkid's pay, especially in the beginning, can be a little bit low because you're going to get that $7 base pay. But until you can really start teaching a lot of classes per month, and until you build up your lifetime of teaching on Vipkid, the pay can be a little bit low. So that's definitely something to consider with Vipkid. Okay, let's go into Magic Gear now. So Magic Gear, I want to start with first. Oh, I didn't mean to zoom in just yet. So Magic Gears has the same base pay requirements. Base pay of about $7 to $8 which is where you will start with Magic Gear. Of course, $8, again, very hard to obtain. $7 is more normal of what you will start at. Now, the cool thing about Magic Gears, unlike Vipkid, is that your base pay can increase. So that's the really cool thing about Magic Gears, is that your base pay is not permanent. It can increase, and we'll talk about that in just a little bit. So let's start here first about our base pay. So your basic pay, let's just say that you were getting $7.75 for your base pay. Okay, so this is how much you're going to get paid per class no matter what. Magic Gear's functions they have two different incentives that they have. They have an attendance incentive and they have a peak time incentive. The attendance incentive is really easy to get. So as long as you do not cancel more than 21 classes in a month within 24 hours, you're eligible for your incentive bonus. And as long as you arrive to your class at least 2 minutes prior to class, you are eligible for this $1 bonus. And that bonus will apply to every class where you do that. And so in a month, let's say that you teach 30 classes, you would get your $7.75 for each class, plus an additional $1 for each class, as long as you arrived more than 2 minutes before that class and you did not cancel more than 21 classes within 24 hours, which that's a lot of classes to cancel in my opinion. So it's very easy. This peak time incentive bonus is another great thing with Magic Gear, because this one is a bonus that you get for opening at least 60 peak time slots per month. And now the key word here is that this is by opening the slot. So you don't even have to be booked for the slot. You just have to open it. And as long as you open at least 60 for the month, you will get $1 for every class you teach. And so it's very easy with Magic Gears to add $2 extra onto your base pay. And so in this case, if I hit my attendance incentive and my peak time incentive, I would actually be making $9.75 per class. And so that's a very quick way, much quicker than I think with Vipkid, to get to that higher pay per class. Now, I mentioned with Magic Gear that you can actually increase your base pay, and this is how you do it. So with Magic Gear, they have a ranking system, and it's sort of like being in school where you're a sophomore, junior, senior, or a Magic Master, and you can actually rank up based on some different factors. So you rank up based on observations. You rank up also based on the number of carrots that you get. And I will show you the carrots. So carrots are incentives that they give you for signing up to take classes that are during very popular times. And so let's say that Monday at 6 a.m., they have a lot of students who want to take a class. They might offer you 5 carrots to sign up and open that slot. And so the number of carrots you have, you can then cash those carrots in to get a promotion and to rank up from sophomore to junior, junior to senior. And so these numbers here, 1,000, 1750, 2000. That's telling you how many carats you would need to get this an additional amount added to your base pay. And so this is something that you can do every 6 months. So every 6 months, if you get 1,000 carats over that 6 months, you can increase your base pay by 25 cents. Once you hit the senior level, if you got 2,000 carats in 6 months, you would increase your base rate by 50 cents. And so this doesn't matter about your incentives. You're still going to get those extra $2 if you hit your attendance bonus and your peak time incentives. You're still going to get those extra $2 per class. But these are ways that you can actually increase your base pay. And so I think that's pretty cool that you actually can increase that base pay with Magic Years. Okay, moving on. Now, Bling ABC, I don't want you to freak out. I know that this is a very busy slide, but Bling ABC has one of the most complex bonus structures. And I put all of this information on here because I will share this presentation so you can kind of see a little bit of it in more detail. But just to simply kind of go through it without spending an hour reading every paragraph, the base pay for Bling ABC starts typically at $14 per class. And so you could get more, but this is the standard base pay is $14 per class. Now, Bling ABC, similar to Magic Years, does have a way that you can increase your base pay, which we'll talk about soon enough. But first, let's talk about the bonuses. So first, Bling ABC gives you a bonus if you teach classes on Saturdays and Sundays. So if you teach on Saturdays and Sundays, you can get an extra $3 added to your base pay. So instead of getting $14 for a class, you would actually get $17 for a class. Additionally, if you substitute classes, so for Bling ABC, they have a way that you can sign up to be a substitute. And so if you sign up to be a substitute and you do that, you can get an extra $3 on your base pay. Now, if you substitute classes on Saturdays and Sundays, then you also get a $3 bonus on top of that, on top of your of substituting. So that's still another $3 for your Saturday and Sunday substitutions as well. All right, now perfect attendance. This is the one that's actually a little bit confusing, but adds up very quickly. So for perfect attendance, which means that you do not cancel any classes, you do not request days off, you actually work your entire schedule as scheduled. Remember, Bling ABC schedules you for an entire semester. And so you will know what your class schedule will be for the next 2 or 3 months. And so if you work every class, do not cancel, do not ask for days off, then you can get perfect attendance. And perfect attendance will give you an extra $2 if you have perfect attendance within the month. They will give you an extra $2 for every class that you taught in that month. But then if you have perfect attendance for a consecutive 6 months, then you'll actually get an extra $3 per class starting in the 7th month. So if you have perfect attendance for 6 months, they'll actually increase that to be $3 for every class that you teach during the 7th month. And now, one thing to consider when we're thinking about these, and let me just do one more thing. Perfect attendance for Saturdays and Sundays, even more. If you have perfect attendance on the weekends, it's actually a $5 that you will get for every class that you've taught on a Saturday and Sunday for the first month. If you have perfect attendance on Saturdays and Sundays for 6 months, you'll get an extra $6 beginning in the 7th month for every class that you teach on Saturdays and Sundays. And now the cool thing about Bling ABC, I've said a lot of these numbers, but these bonuses actually do add up. And so, for instance, if I teach on a Saturday and Sunday, I get this $3 bonus. So now I'm getting $17. But let's say I have perfect attendance for all of my classes that I've taught on Saturday and Sunday, then I'm still going to get another $5 per class for every class I taught that month. And so for those Saturday and Sunday classes, I could be making up to, what would that be? Up to $22 per class, because I have perfect attendance and I was teaching on Saturdays and Sundays. And so that's why Bling ABC really tends to be, of the classes that we're talking about, they tend to be the ones that pay the most, because you really have an opportunity to really build on a lot of these bonuses that they give. And of course, down here, I do have a large class bonus. And so if you sign up to teach some of their larger classes, so any class that has more than 12 students, you do get an extra $6 onto your base rate. So that's a very big one too. And again, if you teach these large classes, you will still get perfect attendance bonuses, and you will still get bonuses for teaching on the weekends. All of these things are cumulative. They add up if you hit every one. Now, this is what I was talking about. For Bling ABC, you do have an opportunity to raise your base rate, and it's based on a TICO score, which is similar to a FICO score. If any of you know, like a credit score that you have, your FICO score, a TICO score is very similar to that. So there are different categories that they use in your TICO scores. It'll be parent or student feedback, observations, attendance, all of those types of things. And based on your TICO score, you can actually have your base pay raised as well. And so again, Bling ABC tends to be one of the areas where you can make the most money teaching classes, but they're also one of the hardest to get into. So it kind of makes sense. Okay, lastly, we'll go into Prepley, but there really isn't a whole lot that we'll talk about with Prepley because it's so different than the others. So for Prepley, as we've mentioned before, you do set your own rate for Prepley. Now, the average rate for new English tutors is $12 per hour, but this rate can be adjusted and changed at any time. And so you never have to feel that you're locked into a rate. So if you want to try $12, see how it goes, and then you want to change it to $15, see how it goes, you literally can change your rate anytime you want. So that's a good thing about them. One other thing to think about with Prepley is that Prepley does take a 100% commission for trials, and all students receive a free trial with a new tutor. So anytime that you have a new student, the first class that you teach with them, your trial, you're not going to get paid anything because Prepley takes 100% of that commission. And so you will not get paid for trial lessons. Now, after you teach your first class with someone, these are the commission rates for Prepley. And so again, with Prepley, it really depends on the number of hours you've taught on the platform. Once you've taught 20 hours, starting with your 21st hour, your commission rate drops to 28%. Once you've taught up to 50 hours, that'll drop to 25%. 200 hours, so on and so on. And so the longer you teach on Prepley, the lower your commission rate will become. And so the commission rate, I must say, is pretty steep. For the beginners, I know that just for an example, I did start my rate out as $12 an hour just because it was the average sort of rate. And I'll talk a little bit about strategy here in a second. But for a $12 an hour class, until with that 33%, you're only making $8.04. Once that decreased down to 28%, now it's up to $8, I think, and 64 cents. And so you see the amount of commission they take is rather high. But this is an option, and we'll talk a little bit more about the strategy. So, okay. So that's just a quick breakdown of how the pay works on each platform and some things to keep in mind when we're thinking of scheduling each platform. So now let's get into what actually it looks like. So for this portion, I want to do sort of a little bit of show and tell, because I would like to actually show you what scheduling yourself on these platforms looks like. So let's start with Vipkid. Let's first start there. Okay. So this is actually my Vipkid availability, like my booking screen. And so actually right now, I do not have any availability open for Vipkid because I've been doing other things. And so the nice part about Vipkid is that there are no minimum requirements. So you're not required to open a certain amount of availability. It really is up to you. But this is what your availability screen would look like. So let's just look at next week. Okay. So for next week, here's all of the times. You can see here that we have some peak, and then we have the PPT, which is peak times. So this is when the most students are wanting to be scheduled. Now, my time zone is Central US time zone, and these times are reflected in Central US time zone. I can change my time zone if I would like to show what the peak times are in different areas, but this is just to give you an example. And so if I wanted to open some slots, I could just simply click, open this up, and then it would show me as available. And so now this class is one that I would be available to teach. I'm saying that on Monday, the 23rd, I'm available to teach at this time. I'd also be able to click this short notice box. And what short notice does is that says that students would be able to book me with less than 24 hours notice. If this box isn't checked, students can only book me with at least 24-hour notice. Now, the thing that you have to consider with Vipkid is that I could open this entire week. Like I could open slots the entire time and fill up my Monday through Sunday with availability this entire week. But that does not guarantee that I will get a class. And why does that not guarantee that? Because with Vipkid, the parents book you. And so the parents will be looking through the different profiles of teachers on Vipkid, and they will actually select you as their teacher and book a time slot for you. So with Vipkid, I can open several slots during the peak times, which that's when I have the most opportunity to get students. That's when most students are looking to take lessons. And so it's not that these are not available. If I wanted to, I could open myself up at 1 a.m. in the morning. I could do that. Any of these slots that you see here, excuse me, pardon me. Any of these slots that you see here are available. I could open any of them, but except for these. See here, it tells you from 9 a.m. to 7:30 p.m., which is 10 p.m. to 8:30 a.m. Beijing time. Students are usually sleeping. Therefore, they are unlikely to book classes. So they do close off this time. You aren't allowed to book in here. But any of these other times, you have the freedom to open your availability, and you could potentially get students. It's just that during these peak times, that's when the majority of your students will happen. So just think for this one, it's a matter of playing the odds. You want to open up availability, excuse me again, to give yourself the most odds of having a parent select you for your student or for their student and start teaching them. So the more availability you open, the more odds you get of that happening. The other thing to keep in mind strategically is that you can open slots with Vipkid. The other good thing is that you can really open slots really far ahead of time. So as you can see, I'm all the way into September. I can keep going. Now I'm into October. I have the ability to open slots months in advance. And one of the things that I would suggest when opening availability for Vipkid is that you, open up at least a month worth of availability, and 2, make sure that you open up availability that is consistent, because think about it from a parent's perspective. If I want my child to take a lesson from you, most likely I'm going to want them to take lessons every Wednesday and Thursday at 7 p.m. And so parents want to see that your schedule is consistent and that you have consistent availability so that they can then work you into their schedule. If you have, 5 a.m. available this day, 7 a.m. available this day, 2 weeks from now, you have one spot open here, it's going to be very hard to get a parent to pick you because parents want that stability. They want that consistency of, okay, my student, my child is going to have lessons every Tuesday night at 7 p.m. And so the more consistent you can be on how you open your availability, the better off you will be. Okay, now let's move on to Magic Year. So this is a shot of my Magic Year schedule. As you can see here, I've taught a lot of standby this week on Magic Year, and I will be teaching standby again tomorrow morning. But this is my Magic Year schedule, as you can see. Now with Magic Year, the one thing is you can only book Magic Year out about 5 weeks, I think. Let me just see. I'll go ahead and see how far out you can book. So that's into September. So right now I can book about a month out. This is the last week that I have the availability. So now it'll say, oops, you've hopped too far for Bonnie to follow. So right now I could really only put my availability in through the 19th. And as you can see, this is what it looks like to open availability. So I typically work my Magic Years, or I open up my Magic Years during the peak times, 6 a.m. to 8, on Mondays, Wednesday through Friday, and then on Sunday mornings is usually my schedule that I work. Now, for Magic Years, what you will notice is that the system books you. Parents don't book you, the system books you. So let's just look at this next week. The system typically books you on a rate every 2 weeks. So the system will book you on an every 2-week basis. And so for next week, this is my bookings for next week. So far, I only have a few classes booked. This changes literally every hour of I could come back to this in 30 minutes and I would have different classes booked. With Magic Years, your schedule does not finalize until 24 hours before. And so, for instance, just to give an example, this morning when I was getting ready and setting up for this webinar, I actually had 3 classes booked on this Monday here, but now I'm only 1. And so I don't really pay attention to what I've been booked here because it doesn't finalize until 24 hours before. Now, when I mentioned to you that you needed to have at least 60 peak time slots in order to get your peak time bonus, that's what you're looking at here. So do you see these little things that say peak, peak, peak? So if you, in order to get that extra dollar onto your base pay, you would need to open up at least 60 of these peak time slots. It does not mean that you get booked for 60 peak time slots. It just means that you've opened them. And they give you this nice little thing here that shows you if you've earned your incentive or not. So see, it tells me you have earned the peak time incentive because it tells me that for the month of August, I've opened at least 60 peak time slots. And actually this month, I've opened 94 peak time slots and only 5 regular time slots. And so it kind of gives you a full picture. Now, when I spoke about the carrots and how you get a raise, this is what I'm talking about. These little carrots, so you have carrot times 3, carrot times 4. All of the carrots are typically going to be on peak time slots, and they're the ones where there are a lot of students who want to take classes. And so they're really trying to incentivize teachers to open availability for those slots. And so if you either work or you apply for standby with any of these that have the carrots, you get those carrots. And so as you can see here, my carrots that I have so far are 1,165 for my current 6-month contract that I'm on. And then what I have expected, which means that what I have scheduled. So that goes even into some of these September classes that I already have scheduled, but I haven't been booked yet. That takes into account those. And so I know that upon my contract renewal, I can increase my base rate. And so you can always see this, and this was what I showed you. This was the screenshot that I showed you. Once you get to so many carrots, you can get an increase in your base pay. So that's something to do there, okay? All right, so that's what booking with this one looks like. Now let's look at Bling ABC. So Bling ABC is definitely a little bit different even with that. So here's what Bling ABC looks like. And with Bling, the difference is that all of these spots that have X's are not available to be taken. And I don't have any availability currently open for Bling ABC because, again, I'm working on some other things. So I did not open my availability for them. But essentially, Bling has 2 rules. One is you have to open at least 8 time slots per week. So in order to be available or in order to be scheduled classes, you have to open at least 8 slots per week. Vipkid, Magic Ears, they do not have these same requirements. There are no minimum requirements for how much you must open. The other thing with Bling to keep in mind is that is once you open availability, it cannot be changed. And so if I click on this and I want to say that it's available, I can't change it. Once I open it, it stays open. I actually have to email the administrator to have them change my availability. And so that is what's a little bit different about Bling ABC. Now, remember with Bling, once you get scheduled classes, you have those classes for the entire quarter, the entire semester. And so there is more stability where you're not checking your schedule every week to see what's been booked. Once you get it, you have it for a long time, but it just is not as flexible. You really don't have that flexibility here. Once you do it, once you put the availability in, you have to keep it. And you do have to put at least 8 slots per week. So that would be you'd have to at least sign up for 8. So Bling ABC is a little bit more restrictive in that way. All right, and lastly, I'll just show you the Preplay calendar. And so the Preplay calendar is very easy to use as well and to set up your availability. And so here is Preplay. And essentially, you just put what slots you want. So here, if you look at my Prepley, I have that I'm available from 9 to 5 on Wednesdays and Fridays. So these are the days when I've selected that I'm available to take Prepley students. This doesn't mean that I have Prepley students every day 9 to 5, but this is just showing my availability. And see, if you look at my profile, I'll just show you a quick profile preview. When someone comes to my profile, they will then see the times that I have available. So see how I said that I was available from 9 to 5 on Wednesdays and Fridays? If someone comes to me to book my lessons, this is where they would see what times they could book me. And that's how the availability works for Prepley. And so if Prepley, it's very easy to do your availability. You just open it up for whenever you want, and that's when you can take students. That's when the students can pick you. Okay. So all right. So now, the last thing that I wanted to do today, and one of the things that I think is probably the most popular part of what we can talk about, is a little bit of the strategy. And so how do I go about scheduling myself? So, okay. Some things to think about when we're doing with strategy is whether the system is scheduling you or it's the parent's choice. And so, for instance, for Vipkid, you could open 20 different spots of availability and only one of those gets scheduled by a parent. Whereas with Magic Ear, when you open those slots, you're much more likely to get booked. And as I've mentioned in previous webinars, you can get booked from day one because the computer system is booking those classes. And so it's much easier to get booked and have classes there. Also, you have to think about when the schedule finalizes. So for instance, with Vipkid, you will know if a parent has scheduled your class at least 24 hours before that time slot is available. And a lot of times you can see it even more in advance because parents tend to schedule their classes in blocks. So most of my students that I've had on Vipkid will buy like maybe a month of classes and they'll schedule it for like the same time each week for a month. And so you'll usually know when your classes are going to be for Vipkid, and therefore you can kind of adjust your schedule on other platforms. The cancellation policy is also something to really think about. For instance, Magic Ear has one of the best cancellation policies to where you really can get 2 cancellations a month. And when you cancel a class, it can be one single class, or you could cancel even all of your classes within the next 7 days. And that only counts as one cancellation. And you get 2 of those a month with no penalty. And so that's something to consider when you're talking about strategy, is because if you do get double booked, it's very easy to cancel a Magic Ears class without having a lot of negative repercussions to you. Whereas with some of the other platforms like a Bling ABC or even a Vipkid, that's going to show up in your parent when the parent sees your profile. It's going to show how many cancellations you've had, and that can obviously affect new students booking you. And so that is something to consider. And then also, of course, the potential income. So as we've gone through this, it's been very easy to see that some of these are easier to make a little more money with faster and easier than others. Vipkid, it's going to take you a while to build up your clientele, but once you build up your students, then you really start to move on that chart of how many classes you teach per month and how many classes you've taught for a lifetime. And that can very quickly help you build up. But for me, for instance, I just want to show you a really quick comparison, or a very quick comparison. So for Magic Ears, my base rate when I started with Magic Ears was $750 was my base rate that I had. And so I was very easily every time making $950 a class because I always got my attendance incentive, and I always signed up for at least 60 peak time slots. So I was very easily making $950 per class. Now let's just say Vipkid, I wanted to make $950 per class. My base rate was $7. So I would have had to teach 131 classes to get to $9 per class. And it's not that every class would have been $9 per class. It only would have been the classes from 131 to 180. And so all the other classes before that would have been at these much lower rates. And so as you can see, Magic Ears really is a very quick way to make a higher amount of money. And so for me, when I talk about strategy and I talk about how I prefer to work for the different platforms, really it's more of for my potential income. And so Magic Ears has always gotten for me the priority just because my incentives and my base pay are much easier to obtain. Not to mention that I can raise my base rate. So right now, I'm at 775. As you can see, maybe if you very quickly saw when I showed you my profile, at the end of September when my contract renews, I'll get another 25 cents because I've already got 1,000 carats. So then my base rate will be at 8. And so it's very easy to do that, to increase your base rate and then also get those bonuses. And so that's why I feel my strategy. So let's just talk about working multiple platforms really quickly. What I tend to do and what I have done is for Vipkid, when I first started working with them, I opened up a lot of the peak time and peak time slots. I kept those open, but then I also I didn't not open magic ears. I also opened those magic ear slots because I was playing the game of waiting to see if a parent or if a student would book my Vipkid class. And then once I knew that a parent had booked that class, I could then cancel or turn off that availability. So like if I show you Magic Ear one more time, just so I can show you what I mean by this. If I, for instance, this week, okay, this is the week of September 15th. So let's say I had opened up availability for Vipkid all the way through October, and all of a sudden I see, oh yay, I have a new student who has started booking me in September, and they're gonna book me every Wednesday and Friday at 6 a.m. Well, now I know that I can just turn these off. I can just cancel this, and there's no repercussion to me. I can just turn these off, and now I know that I won't be double booked anymore. Now I will have my Vipkid student during this time. But I keep them open because, again, the computer schedules me for Magic Ear. So I'm much more likely to get scheduled this way than leaving it up to the parents to have to. Oh, I don't think you actually saw that. I apologize. I don't think I actually shared it. But what I was actually saying is just that if you see here, you could easily just cancel these. As long as they're not booked yet, you can easily just take them away. So if for some reason I got a Vipkid student who selected these courses, I could just take them away. It's very easy to cancel them or to reschedule them. And there's no repercussions to you. The only time when there's a repercussion is in a case where a class has been booked. But then again, like I said, with Magic Ear, you have the ability to cancel. You get 2 free cancellations. And so say I was like, oh, I want to cancel this class. I can just go to my cancellation screen and I can actually cancel those classes very easily. So, all right. So now I would like to open it up for any questions that anyone may have. You can feel free to type those in the chat, or if you would like to unmute yourself and we can talk that way. But any questions from anyone about this?
I had a quick question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Is Vipkid even going to be a thing because of the new laws that they put in China?
Yeah, that's a good question. And yes, Vipkid is going to continue to be a thing. And so what the rule was in China is that it's really focused on after school programs that are linked to actual schools. And so Vipkid actually did put out a memo to all of its teachers that explained sort of what the new law was, and why that they felt at this time it did not apply to them. And then they also said that with a lot of these types of rules, it could take months to even years to implement. So essentially, not to be worried about it. I will also say that Magic Ears also contacted all of their teachers, and they did something even different. So we used to all be on 6-month contracts, but because of the new rule and just to give us some comfort in knowing that we're going to keep our positions, they actually extended many teachers' contracts to 3 years instead of just 6 years, just to give us that confidence that they're not going anywhere. And so at this time, I know that what the laws are really targeting is what's known as a lot of the cram schools. I don't know if many of you have heard of those, but there are a lot of cram schools where it's part of the actual school or education system that parents are paying for, and this is sort of an extracurricular outside of that. But with these types of things, I can't give any guarantees, but this is the communication that I've been given directly from Vipkid and Magic Ear. Let's see. Okay, so Hannah is asking, so firstly, what is standby? And then secondly, current freshman in college, I don't have a college degree yet. Does that mean I can't work for Bling ABC or Magic Ears? Can this affect my pay rate with Vipkid? Okay, so standby. Working standby is something that's available on many of the platforms so that if teachers have a cancellation or maybe they have a tech issue, you basically come in and teach that class. And so you can sign up to teach standby, for instance, on Magic Ear. They open up standby 24 hours before the class. So let's say, for instance, tomorrow's class at 6 a.m., I could have signed up this morning at 6 a.m. to be standby for tomorrow. And essentially, it means that you may teach a class, you may not. But just for signing up for standby, you automatically get $5. And then if you teach standby, then you actually get your rate plus a $2 standby bonus. So you know how on Magic Ears, there's that $1 attendance bonus and $1 peak time bonus. If you teach standby, they just give you a $2 bonus onto your base rate if you teach the class. If you're not selected or you're not used as a standby teacher, then they give you $5 just for signing up to be standby. So that's what standby is. College freshmen, unfortunately, I do know that for Bling ABC and Magic Ear specifically, a degree is required. And I even think that potentially for Vipkid, a degree is required. So I do know that most of these, you do have to already have your degree. The one that you don't is Prepley. Prepley is one where a degree is not required. And so that could be an option for you if you want to start making some extra money or teaching on the side through an organization like that. But it definitely 100% Bling ABC and Magic Ears have a very strict, you are required to have a degree. Mm-hmm. Good question. Now, I know, and one thing that I will say is just as an independent contractor in general, and this is just something, oh, sorry, and Lena, I'm sorry to answer your question. Is there a way to access your previous webinars? Yes, if you go to the link for the webinar in the app observation schedule, then you can just go access the link, and the videos are in the chat. So the last 2 webinars we had on Skype, the video automatically uploads to the chat at the end. And then for this webinar, once Google Meets produces the video, I will then upload that video to the Skype chat as well. But yes, if you just access those, then you will, and here's what I'll do, just to make it easier for you. Let me see if I can find those other webinars really fast. Okay, so this was one, and I'll just send you the invites for that. So this was webinar number 1. Okay, and the second is on its way. Okay, and this is for webinar number 2. So yes, if you go to either one of those, the video is shared there for you. And what I was saying is they're just at the very, very end. It's just that I do think that whenever you're working for any of these companies, I do think it's best to have a couple of options, just because as an independent contractor, definitely it can go up and down. Your VIP kid, you could definitely have a period where you get a lot of students, then some students could take time off. Maybe they decide that they don't want to do VIP kid anymore. And so then your income might drop a little bit. You might lose some of your students. Same thing with Magic Year. Like for instance, right now, I do believe because of the summer season and a lot of kids are on vacation right before they go back to school, booking rates have been lower. So if you saw when I shared my screen, I've been working a lot of standby because my bookings haven't been as high on Magic Years. Whereas earlier in the spring, like during April, March, even February, it was, if I opened a slot, it was booked 100%. It was all like my schedule was 100% booked. Any day that I opened, it was booked. Whereas now, I think because less students are taking the course because of other things, it's not as booked. So having that variety of different ways that you could supplement your income, of course, I feel like it's sort of like playing the stock market, how they say diversification, diversify. I think diversifying the types of platforms that you work on is also a good idea. Okay. Live meetings, or how do I prove that I attended those meetings? Oh, okay. So for Layla, to fill my practicum requirement observations, do I need to attend only live meets? No, I do believe that you can watch the videos, but you may, honestly speaking, since I don't work for ITA. I actually, I'm with My Culture Connect. So I am so sorry that I may not know the actual rules of what ITA will accept for your practicum requirements. When I went through the ITA's program, I actually did attend all of my observations live. And so I'm not sure if you can just watch a video of an observation. That would be something I would probably reach out to the ITA to get confirmation on. For Monique, do I create lesson plans for each platform? Only for Prepley. And Prepley actually already has lesson plans that you can use, but I do supplement those lesson plans because usually just for different activities, or I might show a YouTube video. Since those are my students, I do typically bring some extra materials with me, but Prepley does have lessons that you can use if you don't want to create your full lesson plan. Okay, and Hannah did say they specifically told us they had to be live. Okay, great. So I'm glad Hannah knew that because I didn't want to tell you anything wrong, and I'm not a ITA representative, so I did not want to speak to that exactly. Can I open a Prepley account even if I haven't finished my TEFL course? Yes. So the cool thing about Prepley is that anyone can put a profile on Prepley. Now, I'm not saying that you might not be the most successful, because obviously if you're thinking about a person who's looking for a language teacher, they're going to be looking for the most qualified teacher at the best price. But yes, you can put a profile on Prepley without having a TEFL. You can put a profile on Prepley without having a degree. None of those things are required. And so potentially, if you wanted to do that, maybe you just set your rate a little lower to make you a little bit more, to make people kind of pick you a little bit more. Maybe you do a little bit of a lower rate since you don't have those other qualifications to maybe warrant a higher hourly rate. And then, I think everyone else is kind of answering their own questions. Oh, yes. And so, no, today's is just a webinar that's just for your information. This is not, so for your teaching observations, you have to be observing teaching. and actually observing classes or observing tutoring sessions. These types of sessions are just informational, just to try to help you as you start your TEFL journey and looking for careers and looking for options of where to work. This is just an informational session, so it won't count as one of your observation hours. So I'm so sorry if you came wanting to do that. My apologies, but hopefully you got some good information out of it anyways. All right. Well, if there aren't any other questions, I really appreciate everyone coming today. Coming up next week, it is our last and final series of this 4-part webinar, and it will be maybe one of the most important after getting paid, and that's the hiring process. And so we will go over tips and tricks of how to get hired, the things you need to get hired, what these companies are looking for to hire you, and go from there, so that hopefully if one of these has sounded good over the last 3 weeks, then you'll know a little more information about how to get hired. All right. And last question here, do you know when MCC summer classes end? Next week is the last week of summer session, but there will probably be other classes beginning in the fall. I know that, so the schools in Taiwan, which is where MCC is located, the schools in Taiwan begin their new semester on September 4th. However, most of the English teachers do like to have like at least a week or two to kind of get their own classes started before they start welcoming in student teachers to help them. And so I don't have a lot of information just yet on what the schedule will look like for the fall, but next week is the end of the summer semester or the summer classes. So okay, everyone. Well, again, thank you so much for attending. I hope that this has been informative for you. Definitely, you can reach out to me on Skype if you have any additional questions, and enjoy the rest of your Saturdays. Bye-bye.